Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming into you on Monday, November 3rd. LA Galaxy into the offseason and making some roster decisions. We have exit interviews. We have end of the season awards. We have all that fun stuff, and we're playing a little catch up here on a Monday. It was a busy week last week, so we're going to get you all the information that you need to know about the LA Galaxy, get you caught up as we rocket into the offseason with roster decisions and everything else. And there's some head scratchers out there, so we certainly want to take some time to talk about them. To help me do all that, we're glad to have him back. After covering another World Series up in Toronto, he's back dressed in Dodger blue. Congratulations to the LA Dodgers, repeat winners. That's a tough thing to do there, Kevin. But welcome back, Mr. Panda, sir. How you doing, bud?
Okay, well, I'm really first repeat winner, by the way, this century in 25 years. The Yankees did it 3 times in a row at the end of last century, but I'm really tired. I'm going to take a lot of naps. In fact, I'm taking a nap right now, which will become readily apparent as the show goes on.
No. I was my big flex that I had was on Saturday night. On Friday night, Halloween, I go over, and of course the World Series is getting ready to go on. It's up in Toronto, all this. The kids are getting ready in their outfits and the whole deal, and my family's pretty baseball crazy. My mom is a huge Angels fan, by the way, so she was a huge Toronto fan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry.
She picks bad teams. It's like my wife saying, hey, you're going to be the San Diego. She goes, I think we're going to pick the San Diego Chargers as our NFL team. I'm like, hey, that's going to be a tough slog for us, I have a feeling, if that's going to be the case. Same thing with my mom and the Angels. But anyway, so it was a heavily, Blue Jays heavy crowd at Halloween. But I'm like, they're like, man, I wonder what it's like there. And I'm like, well, let's call Kevin and ask. So then I called you while you were in the press box the whole deal. I'm like,
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, no.
You heard how loud it was.
It was loud. You could hear the background, the whole deal. And everybody's like, are you really talking to him right now? I'm like, yeah, he's there. He's there right now. That's my flex, is that I get to call you and talk to you while you're at the World Series. So how was you? For sure, we're going to talk about the LA Galaxy. I realize that. However, the Dodgers winning, you were there. I think it's only appropriate that we start the show a little bit and you tell us what that experience was like.
Well, it's the first season ever to begin end to end outside the U.S. Remember, the Dodgers opened in Tokyo, finished in Toronto, both foreign countries. It was cool, the U.S., we see the big games, they always roll out that big flag that takes up the whole field. Canada has one of those too, and they rolled one of those out. That was kind of cool.
Are you sure
Dodgers,
it's not two-sided where you can flip it over one time? Canada?
It might be.
Okay.
And if they did the wrong side, that would be pretty embarrassing.
It would be.
But man, the Dodgers just, I'm not saying they're lucky, but they're magical. I mean, they just, Miguel Rojas doesn't start a game in over 3 weeks and becomes the first player in baseball history to hit a game-tying home run in the 9th inning of a Game 7. They had 2 video replays, either one of which could have given Toronto the series. Both of them went the Dodgers' way. Andy Pejas, put into center field as a defensive replacement for his arm, not for his glove, makes a catch, which I saw Sporting News today did some sort of mathematical ranking that said there were only 7 catches equal to or better than Andy Pejas' catch, which he made just a couple of pitches after coming into the game, saved that game. Kike Hernandez said twice in Game 6 and Game 7. If you remember in Game 6, Kike Hernandez had that throw to make the double. Well, no, first of all, the ball that got wedged under the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Kike Hernandez threw his hands up and he said the runners kept running. So meaning to him, the umpire hadn't stopped play. The left field umpire stopped play, and no one ever looks at the left field umpire because he's not there during the regular season. But in any case, Kike Hernandez says, I threw my hands up to say ground rule double, and the runners kept going. And he said this in Spanish, and he goes, my first thought was, did I just lose us the World Series?
Mm-hmm.
And then when Pejas made the catch, if you remember, he knocked Kike Hernandez to the ground. And as Kike is laying on the ground and hears the crowd reacting to the catch, his thought was, we just lost the World Series. So twice in 24 hours, he was laying on the ground thinking, we just lost the World Series.
It was it was. There were a couple of times as a spectator watching, and as fairly neutral, I do tend to lean towards the Dodgers anytime they play. But it was crazy.
You know what was funny? We went down to the interview room after Game 6, which is really close to the Blue Jays clubhouse. And as we getting off the elevator, there was some workmen there that said, wait, you got to go around. There's, we're moving some stuff around here. Hold on. What they were doing, it was taking all the champagne and beer and everything that was on ice out of the Blue Jays clubhouse because there would be no celebration that night. Oh. And then if you remember, late in Game 7, I think it was in the 9th inning, there was that play where Miguel Rojas made a stop and then had to throw home, and yes. Will Smith made the force out. That was one of the video replay calls. And if you saw that video replay, you realize how close that was.
Yes.
And I saw somebody write today, imagine if the umpire had ruled the runner safe, which you could have done it,
right.
Based on how close that play was. Yep. If he ruled him safe, the stadium goes nuts, the Blue Jays start to celebrate, the confetti comes out, the fireworks go off. Then there's a video replay to overturn that. How uncomfortable would that have been?
Kind of like when there was that whistle at MLS Cup that had everybody running onto the field and celebrating, but it was really just for offside or whatever it was at the end of the game, and they had to play another 30 seconds or whatever it was for that game. No, it was impressive, and I don't think, and maybe in baseball there's a better understanding of it, but repeating in any sport, whether that's the NFL, whether that's hockey, whether that's baseball, or whether it's Major League Soccer, is such a monumental task when you put in all these other factors. Obviously, the Dodgers tilt that field as much to their advantage as they can, using the buying power that they have. Sort of in a non-capped league, in a punished but allowed sort of way for baseball, but. It's just such a monumental task, and to have that and see those guys be able to pull it off back to back is really impressive.
Last repeat winners in the MLS?
Yeah, the LA Galaxy, 2011, right. 2012.
Right, so it's been over a decade.
Yeah.
And the league's only 30 years old, so it's been more than a third of the league's existence since that's happened.
100%. Well, we're glad to have you back. There's some LA Galaxy news, and we should just start and we'll roll through it. Yeah.
Absolutely. We got to get to that Club America game, right? That's what you're talking about, right?
That was funny. So we did, there was media availability. I would like to thank the LA Galaxy for putting that together, by the way, last Thursday. Almost 3 hours of media availability, and that's something that we haven't always had, especially after years. Whenever you have an MLS Cup, you're very unlikely not going to get any time with the players after that. It's usually a whirlwind. Everything's pretty crazy. So 3 hours of media availability, most players there. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But one of the things that happened, ahead of that was that they got to announce the end of year awards. So we want to go through those first to make sure everybody's up to date on what those were. I would like to say a clean sweep for Corner of the Galaxy in terms of choosing who the team awards were. Damian Calhoun was on here. He and I both picked the two that we actually got to vote for. There are several that we don't get to vote for, but we get to vote for Player of the Year and Defender of the Year. Both of those were nailed by the COG team, despite the fact that people protested so much. But that's okay. We'll start, though, at the bottom of things, and one that should get a lot of recognition, and it will be downplayed. In fact, I was on Reddit, which I try not to be very much, but I was on Reddit telling people whenever Dylan Vanney won the Academy...
Nipple baby.
Yeah,
Nipple
exactly.
Baby.
Exactly. Academy Player of the Year, Dylan Vanney, midfielder. People were like, oh, he only got it because his dad's the coach. I'm like, man, this kid had an absolute great year. Dylan Vanney, on this show, I think we've been keeping it as honest as we can. Dylan Vanney deserves first team minutes. That's where Josh is right now on Dylan Vanney. And we actually got to talk to Greg a little bit at the end of the press conference because it's always fun to go coach talk about Academy Player of the Year and dad talk about Academy Player of the Year. So Dylan Vanney got in there. Vanney, who's 17 now, was named the 2025 LA Galaxy Academy Player of the Year. He was one of the players who helped the U19s defeat Cedar Stars Academy 3-1 in the final of the 2025 U19 MLS Next Cup on June 22nd. He scored 3 goals in the tournament, including one in the final, and was named the 2025 MLS Next Cup MVP. So Vanney is part of the age group that completed the three-peat in MLS Next Cup over the last 3 seasons, and at the international level was recently called up by the U.S. U19s men national team for a training camp in Spain. For Ventura County FC, Vanney scored 5 goals, 3 assists in 26 matches, 25 starts. So Dylan Vanney gets the LA Galaxy Academy Player of the Year.
So he's an Academy player, meaning he goes to Dignity Health Sports Park every day. That's where he goes to school, and that's where he plays as well, right?
Yes, I believe that's all correct. So
you think his parents take him to school?
I would imagine. He is...
his dad works nearby, right?
That's right. It's easy to get there and a whole deal. The thing you'll see is that most of Greg's kids after training will be out on the training field with the senior team and all that sort of stuff. And Dylan's actually been training up with the senior team here after the conclusion of the season. But one of the things you'll see is that Greg will be out there feeding balls and talking about tactics with his kids out on the field. And they'll actually be like, they just got done with training. Those guys trained, down with wherever they are, or if they train with the senior team or wherever but they come up to the field and, hang out with dad, and they go through there and they get some reps into some of that stuff. And it's really a really good sort of thing. And Greg talked about Dylan in a way that was sort of like, he's as soon as the game is over, he'll play for Ventura County or whatever, and as soon as the game is over, he'll be on YouTube watching the replay of the game immediately in the car on the way home. And sometimes his dad's like, you don't need to analyze that much. Sometimes don't take in too much information. Sometimes there's problem, but he's just a gamer. That's the type of thing. Really interesting conversation that Greg had at the end of whether or not, and Kevin, think about this, okay, whether or not a guy like Dylan Vanney, who Greg Vanney said for the first time, this is the first time I've heard him say that, he said that Dylan will be a pro, right? So we've been sort of thinking maybe Dylan will go to college, maybe Dylan will be a pro. Greg seemed to indicate that Dylan will be a pro, but where is that going to be, right? Because do you think that Dylan Vanney could come up through the LA Galaxy system? And do you think he's going to get first team minutes? And what kind of shield would he have to wear in order for that to happen? That has to be one of the toughest situations you could possibly be in as a young player, with ridiculous expectations and the fervor, or at least the rumblings, that it's just the only reason you're there is because of your dad.
Well, and the name, I mean, Vanney is not a normal name. It's kind of a little bit unusual. And I remember Roberto Clemente Jr. coming up, and he was a really good player. This is a long time ago, but he was a really good player, and just washed out in the minor leagues because the pressure was too much. Everybody would say, oh, sure, you're hitting 350, but your dad hit 351. You're not as good as your dad. I mean, so there's another coach in MLS right now, which has his son playing professionally, and he's on the U.S. national team, the team that he used to coach, Sebastian Berhalter with Greg Berhalter.
But
so
what's the difference there?
They're on different teams.
They're on different teams. They've never played together. Sebastian went and did his own thing, and Greg talked about that dynamic, and he also talked about the Wolves, right? I think Josh Wolf and Owen Wolf, right? Well, Owen Wolf's playing for Austin right now, and Josh Wolf was the coach of Austin at one point, isn't anymore, right? So that is one of those things that you sort of sit there and say. So there's a lot to be considered there. From a player perspective, I would suggest the LA Galaxy want Dylan Vanney on the LA Galaxy because I think he's a really good kid and I think he can be a really good player. That's going to be tough for that to happen, but I think if he's smart, maybe he goes somewhere else, right? Maybe he can find, maybe he goes to USL, maybe he goes to a different MLS team and the Galaxy sort of trade him. But talk about a weird sort of, how do you offer him a contract? If you offer Dylan Vanney a contract, this is always fun. If you offer Dylan Vanney a contract, that contract goes to Greg Vanney. Oh, that's right, Greg Vanney.
Well, now Greg has how many sons in the academy?
He has three sons. He has the twins, and then he has a younger one who's a couple years younger than the twins, who are both up in the sort of that they're 17, 18 years old right now.
The reason I bring that up is because the academy was, I think, in a mess when Greg came over. And now, as you mentioned, the three-peat, they're doing really well and producing some players that are going to different national teams, youth programs. Greg at heart is an academy guy. When he went from Chivas USA to Toronto, he went as the academy director. And when he came here, he immediately took an interest in the academy. And what I kind of like about this is he has 3 kids in the academy, which I don't know how the Vanney family dynamic works, but I'm guessing that there was a lot of talk around the dinner table about how the academy was going, about, hey, Dad, we should do this. Hey, Dad, we should have more towels in the locker room. Any of those little things to make things better. Greg didn't have to go ask people. People were telling him about it every night. And again, Greg at heart is a youth development guy, is an academy guy, and you see the way that academy has been turned around. And I think his sons probably deserve a little bit of credit. I mean, I'd be surprised if there weren't conversations about, hey, Dad, how can we make this better?
Yeah, no, and not only that, but Greg said that, while he loves to coach and that's what pays the bills on the whole his like dessert, right? Like you feed yourself with being a head coach. He goes, the dessert is the academy side of things and how much he loves developing players. It's really interesting talk. Went on for about probably 20 minutes longer than everybody expected to, but that's usual with Greg. Let's go on. Humanitarian of the year was Mauricio Cuevas. Mauricio Cuevas is one of those guys who's always in the community. The biggest thing was that they just put a futsal court in his name at his elementary school in South LA. So that was big. But in addition to that, he was out speaking to the Coachella Valley Unified School District migrant students while in Coachella for the preseason. He donated $5,000 to their programming. Additionally, passed out clothing and goods at Fanatics Fire Relief event at Dodger Stadium, helped donate new gear to Palisades High School soccer team, and attended the Special Olympics signing day to welcome our new 2025 team. And furthermore, he assisted the LA Galaxy Foundation in donating new soccer equipment to Para Los Niños charter middle school soccer teams and funding their programming for the next 5 years through the Campeones Cup Legacy Project. So a bunch of stuff for Mauricio Cuevas, who continues to just be a wonderful young man, and really looking forward to seeing him find his voice. And I think this year has sort of helped that. And certainly whenever we talk about roster decisions and everything, a guy who a lot of people are paying attention to right now.
And let's talk about that donation real quick. You said he gave $5,000 and then he did a lot of other stuff. But the one monetary figure we have is $5,000. When you talk about professional athletes, we're used to Anjay Kopitar gets $11 million and Shohei gets, and the entire country of Japan, as his pay. Cuevas made $150,000 base salary. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but as a professional athlete, I mean, $5,000 from him that means a lot, because his pockets are not that deep right now, and this is his first major, salary probably. So, $5,000, you think professional athlete can do better than that? No, that's pretty generous, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's great, and like I said, Mauricio Cuevas is going to continue to grow and to be a fine adult professional soccer player. He is right on that border right now, and he I have a lot of respect for just the way he goes about, talks to the press, does his thing, and sort of puts it together. Golden Boot winner was Joseph Paintsel. Joseph Paintsel getting 10 goals, 5 assists in the MLS regular season. But Paintsel also led the LA Galaxy with 10 goals in 25 matches played, 22 starts during the 2025 MLS regular season. On September 22nd, Paintsel scored his first MLS career hat trick against Sporting Kansas City at home. Paintsel became just the 3rd player in LA Galaxy history to produce a first-half hat trick, joining Robbie Keane, who did it in 2013, and Ali Moreno in 2004. So that was Joseph Paintsel.
And look at, before you run away, look at those numbers, because I personally, I don't know about you, whether you want to take credit, but I personally been bagging on these guys all year about not matching last season. Take a look at his stats. He played about 500 fewer minutes, right? And still matched the time with goals.
Yep.
His conversion rate was better. He had fewer shots on target. So arguably, the assists were down, but then he was playing with different players. You could argue that Joseph Paintsel had as good, if not as better year, statistically at least, as he did in 2024, the World Cup, the MLS Cup year. Yeah,
it was. I will say this, that he'll get dinged because most of this really feels like it happened, post July 4th, which, if we remember, almost 2/3 of the season was over by the time everybody reached July and the break for Leagues Cup. But he was great whenever he came on. I mean, really, Joseph Paintsel, and I think we've sort of been talking about this, possibility of going to the World Cup with Ghana, international breaks coming up, but I think you're going to expect that he's going to be back there. He talked about a little bit in his exit interview stuff that it's a big focus for him, and that he feels like he's going to have a lot of time to get ready for it, a lot of time to put it together, and that he knows, halfway through the season he needs to be playing his absolute best soccer. So I think it only helps the LA Galaxy next year that Joseph Paintsel is going to be in a position to try and make that Ghana team, and he's there right now in terms of he's on that team, but he's on the team on the bench. And so whenever you're looking at a World Cup, you want a guy who's in form, who's coming off the bench for you, right? You need to have somebody who is, pointing in all directions, is really going. So it is imperative for Joseph Paintsel that he starts well. It's imperative for the LA Galaxy that Joseph Paintsel starts well and stays healthy through that first, half of the season. That's going to happen with all sorts of condensed games. And so this is going to be a big focus. Joseph Paintsel scoring goals and looking at Ghana as the stepping stone to a really good season. Now, what happens after the World Cup? If he ends up going, that's going to be a discussion when we get there, right? But what happens leading up to the World Cup? The LA Galaxy need Joseph Paintsel to be Joseph Paintsel of last year. The LA Galaxy need Joseph Paintsel to come out of this gate firing, and I think that the LA Galaxy in general need that. They need to come out of the gate firing.
And Ghana is a really good program. I mean, you might, if you don't follow international soccer too much, you might just get lost. Like Ghana is one of those teams in Africa, but they were World Cup quarterfinalists in 2010. They have a very good team, a very good program. And if he's on the team, whether he's on the bench or starting, he is an elite player, one of the best in Africa.
Well, I won't say that we had anything to do with this, but we recently had the LA Galaxy Defender of the Year, John Nelson, on our podcast. Defender of the Year, there he is, John Nelson. I thought a very clear indication of the best defender for the LA Galaxy. It wasn't really, listen, in a year where the defense was not great, in a year when the offense wasn't great, in the year where you're trying to find some of the highlights, John Nelson was one of the highlights, and I think down the stretch he was ridiculously good. One of the reasons the LA Galaxy brought him back and exercised his option. We'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But John Nelson, in his second season with the club, appeared in a career-high 31 matches with 24 starts, a defensive mainstay, won 36 aerial duels and 22 clearances. It's always nice to get those defensive stats in there. He also recorded a career-high 3 assists. Nelson had a season high of 3 aerial duels. Look at him. 3 whole aerial duels for John Nelson. Isn't the tallest guy in the world. It's okay. It's a good thing to have in there. In the Galaxy's win over Sporting Kansas City and Minnesota United, while ending the season on back-to-back 2 clearance games against FC Dallas and Minnesota. He was also a starter in 2 of the Galaxy's 4 shutout wins in 2025 across all competitions. That's LA Galaxy Defender of the Year, John Nelson. Anything on John Nelson, or shall we go to Player of the Year?
No, we should go to Player of the Year, but I would be interested to know if there's a guy sitting in the press box saying, that's an aerial duel. Oh, that's not. Nope. No, only 3 aerial duels, almost a 4th, a 3.5 aerial. How do you know what an aerial duel? Is it like a dogfight in like combat?
It's I guess whenever 2 guys go up for a ball, it's whether or not you get to win it or not. That's really it. Now, the thing that doesn't say is that were there 20 aerial duels that he was in and he won just 3, or was it 3 was his career? Oh, it's like one of those, right?
Good point.
Like, yeah. Hey, there were 100 and you got 3. I don't know if that's a great thing. Regardless of the fact, it would be hard to find defensive stats that would back up a lot of stuff with the LA Galaxy.
I think a lot of these stats, like if you look at stats in volleyball has a ton of stats now. If you've ever watched the volleyball game, statistics really don't come into it. There's a ton of it's because like some of the main, football, baseball, and now basketball, they have so many stats, and there's so much of that, statistical breakdown stuff to rate players that other sports are coming up with. I'm not sure, if we don't know how many aerial duels there were and we don't know what an aerial duel is, I'm not sure that number means much. But congratulations, John, on 3 of whatever you did.
Whenever he sees you, I hope he kicks you in the shins for trying to denigrate the wonder that is John Nelson. Okay, I
have not done it. He was, and Will Kuntz too. Will Kuntz found him, and he had. Everyone thought he was played himself out of favor in St. Louis. It was a financial thing.
You see,
it was not.
You didn't know that he came on. You didn't hear his thing on the podcast, right? So we have sort of assumed that he doesn't want to talk about the St. Louis thing because we've asked it in a bunch of different ways, the whole deal. So we got John Nelson on the podcast. We were like, "Hey, John, what does it feel to sort of have, your career sort of resurrected after, maybe a low point in St. Louis?" He goes, I really don't like to talk about what happened in St. Louis. He goes, but I'm going to. And then he went off and told us exactly what happened. And it
was financial, right?
It was financial. In a way, it was financial. They said, hey, whenever they talked to him to come over to St. Louis, they were like, hey, we're going to sign you to a new contract. And he's like, all right, awesome, that's cool. And so they were sort of working through it. So they get through about halfway through the season, they realize the two sides are too far apart. Like, they're offering something, but John's like, my agent and I aren't going to take it, so we're not going to take it. Whenever they didn't take it, St. Louis said, well, being you're not going to take our contract, then you're not going to play anymore. So you can train with the club, you can do whatever you want, but because you're not going to take our contract, you're sitting on the bench. And that was that. End of story. That's how they treated it. That is, and I'm not so sure. I don't understand that thinking. And quite honestly, the interview we did with John Nelson was really interesting just because that was one of the things, but it got picked up by the St. Louis fans, and they were less than thrilled about how that all went down. I was watching the discourse between all of them.
Because that was a playoff team.
That was.
St. Louis team was a playoff team. And so basically they're saying, because you won't take our contract offer, we're going to tank in the playoffs by not playing our best guys.
100%. So that's what it. So I thought it was really interesting. So
I'm a big John Nelson guy. I have been. I thought it was a great signing, and I thought he came over rejuvenated, willing to show that he deserved that contract. And there was some talk about whether he was going to lose his spot to a healthy Aude, and I always felt like John Nelson was the guy that needed to be in there. He's a character guy. He's a grit guy. He's not flashy. He's not gonna light it up with a bunch of aerial duel wins, but he's gonna win games for you.
Yeah, by the way, UCLA says those St. Louis front office people are gone, right? Yes, I do believe that some of them are gone. I don't know that all of them are gone. Yeah, no, here's the thing is that not only is John Nelson a really great defender, but he's less than $300,000 whenever you look at what he costs, less than $300,000. So with the option that may go a little over 300, because usually options have an increase in it year over year. But John Nelson, $291,667.
That's just guaranteed. The base is 275, but like I said, he's kind of a John McCarthy outside the goal, a character guy, a grit guy, a guy that you can depend on. I'm glad he's coming back.
Yeah, it'll be fun to sort of watch him, especially I really feel like he's sort of established, which now leads the question is, what are you going to do with Julian Aude? And I still think there's an upside for Aude, but that's something certainly we'll get to talk about in the offseason. Let's go to Player of the Year, and no surprise, it is Mr. Diego Fagundez, as predicted by Corner of the Galaxy. Diego Fagundez had a 6-goal, 3-assist year, but really it was about his leadership on and off the field. It was about him pulling together in midfield that seemed to be lacking at some points. It was about playing every position he was asked to be playing and putting in all those games. In fact, the only game really that he missed in terms of not being able to play at all was one where he actually had some sort of break in his ankle or a fracture or something that was small. And he said, I want to play. And they said, no, you can't play. You have to wait at least a week. And so he waited a week and then came back in. So a big deal. Now, the bigger news sort of on Diego Fagundez, and not something that I think we've sort of we've missed. And by the way, I'll give you in his third season with the LA Galaxy, and 15th in MLS, Fagundez totaled 9 goal contributions, 6 goals, 3 assists, and 32 matches played, 29 starts across the MLS regular season 2025 campaign. Fagundez led the club in key passes, 51, crosses, 23, and earned 90% accurate pass percentage. He also joined the 75-75 club with 75 career goals and 75 career assists, making him just the 8th player in league history to reach the 75-75 assist landmark. And with his start on May 14th against Philadelphia, Fagundez became the youngest player to make 300 MLS regular season starts.
But how many aerial duels did he win?
So,
we don't know that. We don't know that.
We don't know that. But him and John Nelson are in a race to see who can grow fastest, because neither of those guys are super tall. Love them both. Just not, it makes me feel good about myself whenever I get to talk to people who are shorter than me, even though they're professional athletes. It makes me it's just like, hey, my life isn't so bad. What do you know? So that's Diego Fagundez. Now, we shift quickly over to the roster decisions, because the roster decisions are important for the LA Galaxy and important to understand what is happening. And some of these have me scratching my head a little bit here, Kevin. So we will talk about them. But the LA Galaxy currently have 17 players. That's right, 17 players on the roster under contract for the 2026 seasons. You will need to know that the LA Galaxy exercised the 2026 contract options for defenders John Nelson, Mauricio Cuevas, midfielders Tucker Lepley and Isaiah Parente, and Gino Vivi. The club extended its contracts, and I'll explain that in a second, with forward Christian Ramirez and goalkeeper Brady Scott. The LA Galaxy continues its discussion with Botafogo to retain Nascimento for the 2026 season. All right. Now, LA Galaxy declined the 2026 contract options on forward Miguel Berry, defender Eric Zavaleta, and midfielder Diego Fagundez. And the club remains in conversation with Fagundez about returning in 2026. So that is the current roster. So here's your roster. Here are the decisions that have filled that roster. All of these are up to date as of October 30th. So JT Marcinkowski, Novak Mitrovic, Brady Scott, no changes there on the 3 goalkeepers, but the Galaxy don't have 4 goalkeepers this time because John McCarthy went over to New York. You have 10 defenders currently on the roster. That's Julian Aude, Mauricio Cuevas, Asiel, and Senge on loan to Phoenix still in the USL. Miro Garces, Harbor Miller, John Nelson, Chris Rindolph, Mickey Amane, Maya Yoshida, and Zonka. All right, those are your 10 defenders. Midfielders, Edwin Cerrillo, Tucker Lepley, Isaiah Parente, Riqui Puig, Marco Royce, Lucas Sanabria, Gino Vivi, and Elijah Winder are your 8 midfielders right now. Your forwards, Joseph Paintsel, Gabriel Peck, Ruben Ramos Jr., and Christian Ramirez as it stands right now. So those are your 17 players that are currently on the roster. Now, Kevin, lots of things that sort of come in here. Let's talk about first the exercise contract options. We talked about John Nelson getting an exercise option, so that one makes sense to me. Mauricio Cuevas easily makes sense to me. No problems with that. Midfielders Tucker Lepley and Isaiah Parente. Off roster or at least off salary cap guys, Tucker Lepley and Isaiah Parente, so not necessarily hitting the cap, not necessarily a big issue there. I think the Galaxy are looking for depth, and these are young, relatively inexpensive guys who could play somewhere between Ventura County Fusion. I always want to say it. Ventura County FC and the senior team can be that depth that they sort of want. Gino Vivi is an interesting one. This is a guy who went down and played for Saprissa, came back, was listed on basically the first team, but without an international slot for Gino Vivi, Kevin. They couldn't put him back on the senior team to have him play up on that roster in 2025. Now he is in the process of getting a green card. He told us that he hoped that process would be done by January. Basically, he said he can't believe it's taken this long already, but he's in the final stages of it. Everything looks good, and it should be approved by January, so he get a green card, so he won't take up an international roster slot, and the LA Galaxy using him for depth in that. Still really high on Gino Vivi in terms of what he can do. They think that he developed a lot whenever he was down playing, and so now that he's back with the LA Galaxy, there's hopes that he will also help and sort of provide some of that depth that they're trying to manufacture here, especially in the first half of the season with so many games, because we know there's going to be a 6 to 8 week break for the World Cup, right? So everything's getting congested. So relatively little issues, I think, with those for me.
Well, a couple of things. I would tell Gino Vivi when his green card is ready to not pick it up himself. Send a body double, because ICE is just roaming the halls there, just waiting to grab people as they go up to get their green cards. Also, you kept saying that roster is at 17, and you read off 25 names. Why don't you explain the difference between the 17 and 25? Why there's a discrepancy there?
Well, basically, just the 17 is the 17 players that were already under contract for the 2026 season, and then the ones what they exercise on the outside, right? So,
and there's some that aren't on the first team roster as well.
And there's some that aren't on the first team roster. There's some guys who are off, the whole deal. So we go through all those and try to figure those out whenever they come through. Now let's get to the club extended its contracts with forward Christian Ramirez and goalkeeper Brady Scott. Brady Scott, basically, they're not calling it a new contract. They're basically just calling it probably an extension of an existing contract, which means another year on the contract, which necessarily doesn't mean it's a new contract. It gets stupid, but basically Brady Scott's here for another year. He's a really interesting guy, by the way. We got to talk to him a little bit. Really like Brady Scott. Played some in Germany. Actually speaks German. So it was a gunner who's one of our guys in the press. Also speaks German, and so they were talking German a little bit, and there was a whole long conversation for it afterwards. So Brady Scott seems like a cool guy. He's now in those 3, right? So he is with the Novak Mitrovic, he's with the JT Marcinkowski, who are going to probably fight it out for 1 and 2, and he's going to be the 3rd guy, the backup. So playing a lot with Ventura County Fusion. Again, I did it again. Ventura County FC. It's going to be one of those nights. Ventura County FC, but also getting a chance if anybody gets hurt, he will be on that bench come, playing in that sort of that second backup role should anybody sort of lead off. So by I guess, attrition more than anything. He's now moved into the third spot with John McCarthy now off. So it's still 1-2, and he's still 3 at the bottom of the pecking order, but Brady Scott is back in. Now let's talk about Christian Ramirez. I was pretty clear on this show that I thought it would be Christian Ramirez's last year. I am still somewhat confused by the contract terms that they're using for Christian Ramirez in terms of extending it, and the timeline that sort of happened. Will Kuntz came out and said that this is something that had been done for a little while. So this is something that happened at some point during this year. And it might have been a handshake when he came over.
And that's sort of where I think it's going to, is it could have been a handshake. Basically, he said, hey, if you come here, to the LA Galaxy for this amount of time, then, if you can come over from Columbus and you want to come here and we can sort of make a deal on how this works, we're going to give you another year.
And so why would the Galaxy do that? Because at that time, don't think of the end of the season when Christian Ramirez wasn't playing. Think about the beginning of the season when Nascimento wasn't signed yet, and when they had a real and they had just dealt Dayon. They needed somebody, just a warm body to stand in front of the net. So they may have been a little bit under the gun to make some sort of a deal to get him to come over.
I think that's being kind, certainly, right, to Will Kuntz and that thing, because realistically, when you look at what Christian Ramirez did this year and what Greg Vanney has wanted out of Christian Ramirez, it's nothing. Greg Vanney talked about getting, having 3 number 9s and getting 7 goals from them all season. And basically, Vanney was saying, we need to do something different and we need to change some things up. But here you have, and in the press release, it says that the LA Galaxy, 1, extended the contract with Christian Ramirez, and 2, are trying to get Nascimento back. If we believe the press release, if we believe what Will Kuntz is saying and everything else, then I asked the question straight up to Greg Vanney, why are you bringing, if you say you need more goals, why are you bringing back 2/3 of the guys who got you 7 goals? Right. And that to me doesn't make sense.
And I would argue the most valuable of the 3, especially when you're figuring salary, is the guy they let go.
Yeah.
I would say Miguel Berry would have, because of his height and the way he is sort of Alan Gordon-esque when he comes in. If I had to pick one of the 3, I would have kept Miguel Berry.
And maybe, and I will give you this. One is that it's pretty hard to say that after this year where Miguel Berry did relatively little, but again, the strikers did relatively little. Nascimento did not fully gel with the team, especially at the beginning of the year, and you didn't get much from him in terms of goal scoring towards the end of the year, but he looked like he had sort of the brightest moments. Quite honestly, Christian Ramirez probably had the best of in terms of the start. He got 4 goals rather quickly, sitting there for the Galaxy when he was playing. But Greg Vanney told us he wasn't mobile enough. And again, Greg went into a long sort of explanation of, if we get the right guy in the right situation, this sort of leads me to, I don't know that Nascimento's actually trying to be brought back. I don't think Greg Vanney necessarily wants Nascimento to come back. I don't know if Will Kuntz wants Nascimento to come back. I don't know how that's going to work. It doesn't feel like they're on the same page in terms of how the strikers set up right now. And that's my opinion from listening to both of them talk. It just seems that that one would be happy. Well, one is that you're bringing Christian Ramirez back. At $570,000 of guaranteed money, Kevin, you're bringing Christian Ramirez back,
which is more than Nascimento and Berry made.
Yeah,
substantially more than Berry made.
And if he's not, as Greg Vanney has sort of indicated to us, and while maybe he hasn't said it flat out, although sometimes I think he has said it flat out, he goes, he's not mobile enough. Greg Vanney said, with who we have on the team, with Riqui Puig, with Joseph Paintsel, with Gabriel Peck, the number 9 that we get in there can score 15 to 20 goals in this league because those guys will be feeding him. And he said, we need guys who can get there on time and finish. He goes, we have guys who can't get there. And I swear to God, he's hinting at Christian Ramirez. We have guys who can't get there but can finish. He goes, we have guys who can get there but can't finish. He goes, but we need a guy who can get there and finish. Like, he was very, I remember the get there and finish, like, whole thing. I can almost quote it verbatim for how it's stuck in my head. So I don't know what the idea here is. And if you made a deal with Christian Ramirez and it was a handshake deal and you did the whole thing, that's great. And I understand having to be true to all the different things. But if Greg Vanney doesn't think that Christian Ramirez can play in his system in that spot, then you just brought back a guy who's going to cost you almost $600,000. And again, I don't know what the new contract is. Maybe the new contract's for $250,000. Does that matter? Yeah, it would. You would sort of sit there and say, okay, I can deal with that. So the numbers will matter.
But based off of the timing of it, I would say that it's not a significant pay cut on any of this stuff, Kevin. You know, like if this was a handshake deal at the beginning, as maybe we can guess, then that number is going to be closer to what he's making right there than it's going to be in the 250, 300, 400 range, in my opinion.
A lot to unpack there. I mean, if you look at the roster decisions, first of all, just basically, we can talk about this more if you want, but here's a team that had the worst season in Galaxy history, and that's not just an objective, subjective viewpoint. That's
Correct.
objective. The statistics say that. Worst season ever.
Right.
And you rewarded the coach with an extension that makes him one of the most best paid coaches in MLS history, and you brought back virtually the entire team. I can't see that happening in any other first-tier league in the world where you have the worst season ever and everyone comes back.
Right.
But having said that, and we can talk about that later if you want, but having said that, when you look at the lineup, the back line is all back. Everyone's there. The midfield, it's all back.
It's not. I mean, yeah, I know what you're saying for starting wise, but Eric Zavaletta's not there anymore. That does allow the LA Galaxy to go in and try to find some. But you're right. Zonka's back. Yoshida's back. You're going to have Amiro Garza's back. Rindolph is back. John Nelson is back. Aude is back. Cuevas is back. Yamane is back.
Same in the midfield.
Yeah.
Royce and then is back and Cuevas and Cerrillo, and you're going to have a healthy Riqui Puig. Supposedly the two wingers are back. The only spot left, the only spot where there's really a hole, and even though two of the three players came back, but we know that they're not really happy with them. So the only place where there's a hole right now is at the number 9. And so it's pretty clear what the attention and the focus is going to be in the offseason on the number 9. Because Ramirez is back doesn't mean that he's going to be there when Coachella opens.
And
they can move him.
And I asked that question specifically to Will Kuntz because I can't wrap my head around bringing Christian Ramirez back. And to his credit, that's not really a question he can answer right now, right? It's not one he could say, yeah, Christian Ramirez, we're going to shop him right now, and he's probably going to be gone. But he said he's on a roster, so I expect that he'll be there. That was the response, and I get that. That's a fair answer to a question.
Even if he is coming back, he's not a starting number 9 in MLS right now. So the focus this offseason, everything the Galaxy will be looking at is to replace. That it's just to sign a number 9, not to replace a number 9, to sign a number 9. And I think Kuntz and Vanney need to get on the same page. If the coach says, I want a mobile guy, and I didn't see that, I didn't see the number 9 that I needed, and it hurt us. We had 3 guys that combined for 7 goals, probably 1 goal after July 4th. We need somebody new in the middle up front. If he's saying that and the GM is saying, no, we're fine, then there's a problem there. And to Greg Vanney's credit, he has sort of just shut up and played with the guys they gave him. He didn't want Douglas Costa. We know that. He did not want Douglas Costa. The team spent a lot of money on him. He was one of the best played players in the league. Greg Vanney was well aware of all of his shortcomings, and they all manifested very early and stayed that way throughout his 2 seasons in MLS. It's time to say, if Greg Vanney's our coach and we're going to pay him more than just about any other coach in MLS history, it's time for the Galaxy to say, okay, let's give him the players we want. We believe in him. We're going to pay him. Let's give him the players he wants. Let's give him the tools to do what he does best, which is win soccer games. And if the coach is saying, I need a mobile striker that can score, and the GM is saying, here you go, here's Christian Ramirez again, that doesn't work.
Well, I mean, there's also a other part of this, and I'll go back to Billy Beane and Moneyball, right? There was a point where even if you give, and I know, I remember certain situations earlier this year where it was, hey, see what happens when you play some of the guys that maybe you didn't think were going to be the right fits, right? Christian Ramirez is going to get a lot of crap. I will say that he had some success earlier in the season. And so is that Greg Vanney's view that Christian Ramirez wasn't going to be a success? Is it Will Kuntz's view that Christian Ramirez would have been a success had, Greg Vanney played him more? But I also think that there was real pressure to get Nascimento in there and try to get him up and running too. So, I mean, there's a lot of things happening, but you can't, I don't believe as the LA Galaxy, you can't bring back Nascimento and you can't bring back Ramirez and then complain about why you're not scoring goals at the number 9. And you have to find a spot.
If you're saying Ramirez wasn't mobile enough, is he going to get more mobile when he's now a year older? I mean, he's on the back end of a very good career.
Yes.
And you've just said we got 2 wingers and a midfielder that are all about feeding the striker, but we're going to bring a striker back that can't can't play with them, that can't play the speed that they play, and can't move with the mobility that they play, that's a recipe for disaster. You've set up your whole team, the wingers in the center of the midfield, the whole team, the whole strategy is to get the ball into the middle of the box for a striker like Dayon, to finish, and then you're saying we don't have that guy. So it's a recipe for failure.
Well, and that's sort of funny, too, because, how many of us were questioning Dejan Jovalic being the guy? Remember, in 2024, we're like, I don't know if he can do it. This is us in the preseason. I don't know if Dejan can be that striker. It seems like the Galaxy are banking on him being the striker, and, he seems like a guy who can just come off the bench, do things, and he proved, a lot of us wrong, and it was the right move to keep him, and then, you end up selling him for a significant amount of money whenever he ends up going into that DP slot. Yes.
Well, and let's talk about another guy real quickly. I know you weren't probably going to get to him, but Diego Fagundez, yes. How important is he? And here's why he's important. First of all, he made a lot of money last year, 1.3 guaranteed. He's going to have to take a pay cut. The Galaxy are right at, in 2024, when they won MLS Cup, they were fourth in the league with salary of payroll of $22 million. Last year, they were eighth, and they went up $300,000. So they went up $300,000, and they were eighth. So the league has passed them by. Why do they have the same team when they had salary problems coming out of the MLS Cup and their salary went down just $300,000? Remember all those trades, Delgado and all that stuff.
There and Brugman,
yeah.
Yep.
And then Yoshida taking the pay cut. That was all because of the MLS Cup bonuses, which surprisingly there are no MLS Cup bonuses. So the salary cap looks pretty good, and it's going to go up a little bit anyways. But Diego Fagundez, made 1.3. He's probably going to have to take a pay cut to come back, like Yoshida did.
Probably going to have to take a pay. He will have to take a pay cut to come back. There's now,
and so he's valuable. I mean, he's had some great seasons. He might be worth a lot more to another team. Does he want to come? I think he wants to come back to the Galaxy, but I don't think he wants to be embarrassed by the offer, and I don't think he wants to have he and his family to leave a lot of money on the table. So we'll have to see what other teams offer. But I think the Galaxy have to make a real push for him. Why? Well, because he's so versatile, and because they did lose John McCarthy. He's bilingual. He can talk to Spanish-speaking players, the English-speaking players. He's a clubhouse guy. We just said John Nelson's that. John Nelson, to my knowledge, does not have the language abilities to sort of be that bridge. But also, John Nelson is kind of in a different situation. Diego Fagundez, being a long-term veteran, he's been there. He's done that. He's been around the league a long time, longer than John Nelson. I think he's a valuable guy in the clubhouse as well as on the field. And I think the Galaxy are going to have to. They need to bring him back. Let me just say that. I think he's the most important player to bring back.
What chances do you give of the... I will tell you what mine is, but I want to hear your chance that you think Diego Fagundez is coming back.
Well, I want to think that he has to come back, and I think he wants to come back, but he has options that Maya Yoshida didn't have. And so I think I don't think he plays outside MLS. I don't think he goes back home to South America. I think he stays here. But it's how much is he worth to another team? Is he worth more than 1.3? And it depends on the Galaxy offer. I mean, Maya Yoshida was very upset by his offer. It would cut his pay almost in half after he captained the team to an MLS Cup. I don't know if Yoshida will or Fagundez's pay will be cut that much. I would guess it would have to go under $1 million though. So that's $300,000.
I would suggest that the number that Diego Fagundez will probably need. Well, the number that Diego Fagundez would probably want to come back to the LA Galaxy is around $1 million, right? I think that the Galaxy would probably be willing to pay him about $500,000. I think the chances of Diego Fagundez coming back are less than 10%.
Well, if the cut is $800,000, there's I'd retire. I mean, I'd leave the $500,000 on the table. That's an insult to a guy who's done what he's done.
Well, my whole thing is that the LA Galaxy have basically said, and certainly from my understanding of the situation as well, is the LA Galaxy have said, go out and test free agency because you deserve to get what you can get. We're not going to hold you here and do the whole thing. Yes, we could probably give you a number, but that number was going to be way under what you think you're probably worth and what we think you can probably get somewhere else. So go out and test free agency. So I think it's very above board in terms of what it is. I just don't think the Galaxy can afford to bring him back at anywhere near the number that he has. And then it goes into, and I think rightfully so, you called it, and I asked this question to Greg Vanney specifically, we talked about, and how many times this year have we talked about losing Brugman, losing Delgado, losing Cáceres, right? These leaders on the team.
McCarthy,
right? McCarthy too, right? So you get these four guys who really have departed now as we add them all together. And now you're going to lose guys like, and I know people will laugh, Eric Zavaleta and Diego Fagundez. You have two more senior leadership guys who are now going to be gone. And Greg Vanney said, I absolutely have to think about that. I have to think about how we replace the leaders. And he goes, I'm not a guy, Greg says, I'm not a guy who believes there's one leader for everybody. He goes, you can't have that. He goes, you need different leaders. You need guys who are going to bring people together off the field. You need guys who are going to bring people together on the field. You need guys who are going to help hold people accountable. Like there's different ways to lead in all these different ways. And you need multiple people to be those leaders. And he goes, we have some of those guys still on the team. He sort of talked about Marco Royce being on there and just Riqui Puig coming back and how everybody was sort of like stepped up. Like Riqui Puig is one of those guys who plays, and when he plays, it sort of raises the level of everybody else. And so that's like sort of one of those on the field leaders type things.
Yeah, but those guys, Royce and Puig and Puig and Payne, so those guys are great players on the field, and they are definitely leaders on the field. But they are not the guys that are going to go and get in someone's face at halftime and say you got to play better. Or they're not going to be the guys that, during the dog days when things are really bad. I think a lot of those players kind of deal with their own problems. You need someone that's going to get fired up, that's going to go to guys, and they need to be the kind of players that do that themselves, that lead by example. And when you look at the great Galaxy teams, Landon Donovan was one of those guys. Robbie Keane and David Beckham, great players on the field, leaders in the clubhouse in a certain way, but they weren't that way. Robbie Keane was very caustic to a lot of his teammates and wasn't that great leader that inspired people. David Beckham kind of was like, yeah, I remember one time when I was playing for Real Madrid, that goes over everybody's head. And so I think you've lost a lot of leadership, and I think you need to bring Fagundez back for that. Yoshida can do a little bit of that too, but
I think you're paddling up a creek that is not going to be explored here. I would, if I told you I thought Diego Fagundez was coming back and that it was a lock and for sure, the only way that Diego Fagundez comes back to the LA Galaxy is if he tests free agency and nobody, and I mean nobody, pays them more money than the LA Galaxy.
That's what I was going to say. I think Fagundez would be very smart to go to the Galaxy and say, thank you for the opportunity to test free agency. I appreciate that. By the way, just as I go out to talk to other people, what are you guys willing to pay? And just to find out, because what if the Galaxy will pay $900,000 and Montreal offers $1 million, and he doesn't really want to go to Canada and the taxes are higher and all that kind of stuff. Well, he has an offer. So I would, because otherwise, if no one offers him anything, right, and then he comes back to Will Kuntz and says, thanks for the opportunity, didn't really find anything I like. Will Kuntz is going to say, okay, great, here's $200,000. Why don't you come back for that?
No, here's the thing, though. Diego Fagundez is valued enough within Major League Soccer. I mean, I can pick two teams that would probably have him back and I will call, and with all due respect to Diego, I will call it overpaying for him. I think you overpay for Diego Fagundez when it's around $800,000 or $900,000. I think that's overpaying for Diego Fagundez in a good way, right? The whole deal. I think that in general, what he brings and sort of where he is in the terms of his career and where he's at, that you're probably looking at $650 to $750 is probably a reasonable price in there. And I think the Galaxy are probably going to be in the six-ish, seven-ish. That's my guess. Range if Diego Fagundez was going to come back and they can make it work. I will also say that it seems like the LA Galaxy will be shopping for an additional midfielder as well, right? It feels like that there is, and I would suggest that midfielder would be more in their prime, somebody who's probably already playing within MLS. There are some names that have sort of been floating around. Once we can nail those down, we'll share more, but I still think there's there. So the free agency doesn't open, I think, until December 10th. Will Kuntz said, whenever we said, are you actively talking with Diego Fagundez to bring him back? And he was like, well, Diego can't even test free agency until December 10th. So the right now there are no talks, right? There's nothing going on because nobody can talk to him until December 10th. The Galaxy can, right? The Galaxy is the one team that can talk to him, right? But basically they already said, go out and test free agency, and you can't test free agency until December 10th. So that nothing's going to happen along that for at least a little while.
So he was guaranteed 1.3 and 1.25 was his base, and you're saying 600,000. If they cut his salary in half, I would say, Diego, that's an insult, and you got to run. Well, anyone into the arms of anyone that will take you.
They're not, but that's the whole thing. Is that I think you think that the Galaxy are like trying to strong arm Diego Fagundez into staying, and from all accounts and all discussions they've had, they're sort of been like, no, man, like we could give you money, but it's not going to be what you want. So go find something so that way it works for you. And I think that's the approach you should have in this situation, is that, because the Galaxy now, I mean, in my opinion, overspending on a couple different players. And by the way, we haven't even talked about the players who I'm questioning whether they make the start or to the roster, whenever it comes January, because I think there's still players in here that could be a question mark. I think Yamane, whenever you're looking at defenders, is going to be a question mark about whether he comes back or not. He's under contract, but what could the LA Galaxy move him for? Where could they move him for? And would somebody else pay a lot of money? Because the Galaxy have Harbor Miller and Mauricio Cuevas, both young players. I believe they might even be both homegrowns. I'd have to check my roster status again. But basically, that means they're exempt from salary cap. And so whatever you're paying Miki Yamane, which is a significant amount of money, if I can pull out my chart here, here, you look it up while I talk because it's easier when that happens.
Okay.
But Miki Yamane is an expensive player. You can split his minutes with Cuevas, with Harbor Miller, who you both want to see develop as young sort of guys who are able to, come up in this time.
Yamane is guaranteed 844 with a base of 778. But another thing to think about with this Fagundez on the heels of Maya Yoshida playing every game and captaining the team to an MLS Cup, leading MLS in minutes, and being a solid defender. Didn't have a very good season this year, but when he took the pay cut of almost 50%, which he was insulted by, he was coming off a great season. And now Diego Fagundez, by all accounts, very valuable member of the team, would need to take a major salary cut to come back. I understand the finances. I'm not disagreeing with the numbers need to add up. But I'm wondering how long this takes to get around the league. That hey, if you're if you're a veteran player and you come to LA and you do really well and you are valuable and the team wins, we're going to cut your salary in half and cut your drift.
37 years old, and you're still questioning that contract.
I'm questioning.
He had a crappy season this year too, and you're questioning the contract.
I am questioning the decision to not reward a veteran player for doing what they brought, for going above and beyond. And I'm just saying, if another guy comes in and says, yeah, I'd love to finish my career in LA and I have another couple of years to come and contribute, and I'll go there and I'll do a really good job my first year, and then they'll cut my salary the second year as a reward. That stuff gets around. How do you treat your players? I mean, that's one reason why the Dodgers, if we want to go back to baseball, why the Dodgers get all these great guys like Miguel Rojas and Kiki Hernandez. It isn't because they pay them a lot of money, these role players. It isn't because they pay them a lot of money at the end of their season. It's because of the way they take care of the players and the family and the way they reward them. And you have a chance to play for a World Series check every year. But if the Galaxy start getting a reputation of a team that, hey, look, when your usefulness is left out, is gone, we're gonna, they didn't do that to Sasha. You can't do that to these veteran players. I think that stuff gets around and it makes it very hard for you to recruit players near the end of their career that might be valuable for you.
Sometimes I think you act like players don't have eyes and they don't understand how old they are. I mean, Diego Fagundez is a different story compared to Maya Yoshida. Maya Yoshida is taking a pay cut because he's 37 years old. That's why Maya Yoshida is taking a pay cut, 100%, because you don't know that you're going to get the same, especially after you played every minute of every game, because you don't know you're going to get that same performance from the next year. And guess what? You didn't. So correct action with adjusting the schedule. He can be upset about it, which he was. But that's it. He actually said something really interesting in the exit interviews. And that was, he says, next year I have to give my all. He goes, I have to do better. He goes, I'm going to go in the off season and get my blood work tested. I'm going to send it out and get tested. He goes, I'm doing something because it needs to be better than this next year. And if it's not better next year, he goes, then I need to quit. He goes, I need to be done. I need to hang up the boots. Right. And I thought that was really interesting to sort of hear what Maya sort of had to say. And there was sort of this other part of it, an undercurrent of, it's not a failure unless you give up type thing. And so Maya Yoshida taking that to heart. His offseason will be full of getting better, getting stronger, getting tested, making sure everything is in his optimal place as he's approaching, 38 years old now as a defender. And more than likely probably shouldn't be that starting player whenever it comes to next year. So who is going to be the starting center back? And that's a big question whenever we go there. But you have Zonka, who I question whether or not he'll be back for next year. I think Yoshida is pretty much locked in. I think Zonka would be a really interesting move if you could move him to find some place to go, whether you could mutually terminate a contract, whether you could do anything like that. He told us in exit interviews, Kevin, that he said that it was a real adjustment this year, just being in a different country, playing in a different league, travel, all the things. He goes, it was a lot. He goes, and really, it really took it out of me. He goes, and he hopes he's adjusted for next year.
And he made 600,000, so that's a sizable amount of the payroll there.
If you could move him and free up 600,000, right? If you could move somebody like Yamane, who I think the Galaxy you could free up some roster spot, right? If you could move somebody like Christian Ramirez, you could free up some money. I mean, I'm talking about guys who are right in that center of the roster that you want to thicken up and you want to spread that money around in different ways. Maybe that ends up getting Diego Fagundez more money if you can sort of spread around and do some of these different things. But you are going to have to rely, as the LA Galaxy try to get deeper, on the younger players who had good years this year. Mauricio Cuevas, Harbor Miller. I think in some ways you're looking at guys like, Edwin Cerrillo again. I think you're looking at guys like, where else can I go with it? John Nelson, Julian Aude. Like you're going to have to find some.
You talk about Yamane, who makes a lot more than Julian Aude, but I think Yamane is more valuable. I think he's a better player right now, but he's going to be 33. Julian Aude is a decade younger, makes less money. So do you look at it and say, yeah, I think for the 2026 season, Yamane is the better player. He's going to be more valuable. He's going to help us. But we're going to trade him because Aude has a bigger upside going forward, and he's cheaper.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you're looking at Cuevas and Harbor Miller on the right-hand side, right? That's what you're doing for Yamane on the right-hand side. You're saying that Cuevas and Harbor Miller can make the defensive plays. And by the way, that's asking a lot from Harbor Miller, who's played more of a wingback, from Mauricio Cuevas, who's more of a wingback. I'd say Harbor Miller is the better defender of those guys. And if you're going to get Harbor Miller into regular games, then Yamane has to go somewhere, right? And the bottom line is that you develop some of these younger players, and now you want to see them play. And you have three guys. They all play differently. Yamane, Miller, and Cuevas. They all play differently. They all sort of play the position differently. But if you can find a guy in there you're willing to move, because you don't need three, I'm telling you right now, you don't need three. If you can find a guy you can move, of those three, Yamane is probably the guy who has the ability to move more than anything, and then you will work with the younger guys who are playing on the right. We saw Yamane not play a whole big starting role down the stretch, and the LA Galaxy played well whenever he wasn't in there. I'm not saying he's not valuable. I really like Miki Yamane. I mean, it's the same thing whenever I suggested that maybe you sell somebody like Mauricio Cuevas, because the upside is so high right now in terms of what they want and who wants to go somewhere and how much money you can get for him. But as the LA Galaxy, that's cap space that's going to hurt you because you have homegrowns or you have younger players on team-friendly contracts. You want to play those guys and move some of the heavier contracts if you think that you have a conglomeration of guys together, So that's to me. By
the way, I did text Will Kuntz yesterday on my trip home from Toronto and told him we would be doing a pod today, and if he could just inform me of all the moves he expects to make this offseason, it would be really helpful.
Right. That's always nice.
He declined to do that, so here we are.
Yeah, the 100 deal. And by the way, I mean, you absolutely have to, and this was brought up. I have a secret text message line over here too. Somebody brought up in secret text message line, shouldn't salary be incorporated into the contracts and cost of living in California? 100%, right? It costs more to live in California. 100%. So you end up probably paying a little more here than you do in other places for guys.
It's really interesting you bring that up because, Canada has a really high tax and there's three teams in Texas now. They don't pay any state income tax. The Seattle Sounders don't pay any state income tax. Vancouver plays 50 miles away. They have Canadian tax. I bring that all up because, as you mentioned, that kind of idea is starting to percolate. NWSL wants to do that. They want to adjust their salary cap so that Angel City's salary cap is higher than, say, Racing Louisville,
right?
And it'll be higher by a percentage of what does it cost to live in Louisville, Kentucky, versus what does it cost to live in LA. And I said Gotham then would have a different size. In Florida, where there's no state income tax, Orlando City and NWSL would have a different salary cap.
If we did that in MLS, which team would have the highest salary cap? I think it's Vancouver. Vancouver is a
very expensive city.
Very expensive city, right?
Wow, what a great city.
Right? Yeah, no, great city, 100%, but a really expensive place. I mean, it might be Vancouver might have a higher salary cap, but I mean, ultimately, listen, there's trade-offs though, right? And we know this, Kevin, is that Marco Royce says, I don't want to go to Charlotte. I want to go to Los Angeles. And the LA Galaxy get Marco Royce because he wants to go to Los Angeles. I mean,
he's already made his money, but I remember another baseball story. I remember when I covered the Marlins and Luis Castillo is their second baseman, was a free agent signed. was offered the same money by a bunch of different teams and wanted to go to the Mets, and the Mets really wanted him. The way they got around that is the Mets said, okay, your state income tax in New York at 8.25% of 4.5 million would come to this figure. We'll add that on. So we're paying your tax.
Right.
You're going to get the 4.5 million you would have got from the Texas Rangers, and that sealed the deal.
Okay.
But you can't
Right.
do that in MLS because then you run into salary cap problems.
No, you have salary cap issues, right? And that's the whole thing. I mean, even with like Fagundez is on a TAM deal, right? And so that targeted allocation money is technically you're off cap in a lot of ways whenever you're a targeted allocation money guy. And so that also affects different things. But how do you free up the money? How do you free up the different things? I'm trying to think of roster deals and anything else. I love it. David goes, Josh keeps wanting to sell all of our young guys. It's about, and by the way, I actually think that you should try to move Yamane. That's what I would do, and keep the young guys because the salary cap advantages that go that way. Now, Kevin's right. He can be a warrior. He can be a really good player. We didn't see a lot of him inverted into the 6 like he did whenever the LA Galaxy were really good in 2024. And maybe when the Galaxy get back with Riqui Puig and they start playing and they start doing all the stuff they're supposed to do, maybe he inverts back into a 6 more, and maybe that's the correct spot, and that's where he's more successful as a player. I think he was quieter this year, but I'm just saying, look at the big number guys and then figure out how you're going to move some of those. One of those was Diego Fagundez, right? And so at 1.3, you've now cleaned that up, but look at Zonka. That's a heavy contract for a guy who looked fairly out of sorts for a lot of this year.
And when you're Will Kuntz and you're moving these guys, you look at, say, Diego Fagundez, 1.3 million. Even if you take a little bit of a cut, you got to move 3 young guys to make that up. So it's much easier just to move the big guy. By the way, we were going to talk about Riqui Puig, a.k.a. Marcel Marceau.
Oh, we absolutely can. So there's a bunch of different updates. Let's start at least with the the good news for Riqui Puig, which is that he is back to quote unquote full training. Now, full training, there's a lot of caveats to that.
Well, he's pointing to that big Club America clash.
No, he's not. 100%. No. Basically, Greg Vanney said outside chance. Riqui Puig is basically anybody who said that maybe Riqui Puig will play in this game. Riqui Puig goes on social media and puts a thumbs down because that's where he does all his talking.
So are you saying the game is meaningless?
I mean, it's a game to shorten the as the LA Galaxy so thoughtfully said, it's a game that shortens the offseason, right? That is
And
what's
are they charging shortened off-season prices?
I mean, you can buy 6 tickets for the price of 5, Kevin. I don't understand. I mean, and by the way, the LA Galaxy aren't running that game either. That is a different entity that is sort of running and managing the game and putting on that game. So whole big deal. So that was the good news. So he's back. Now, what does it mean that he's back? Back to somewhat training. He's back with full training, so he's able to do things. But whenever they play in any sort of 8v8 or any 11v11 or anything like that, he's a neutral. So he plays in the center. Basically, he plays on both teams where he can play offense on both sides because they don't want him playing defense yet. It's about reacting to playing defense and getting into the physicality of playing defense. So instead, they just want him to focus working on the offensive side of things and doing that. So there's a lot of different things. He's not getting tackled. Greg Vanney said that it was really important for him to stay within their training group just because everybody here knows what he's been going through and knows what's going on. And so nobody's going to come in and slide tackle him, that type of thing in the middle of training. So that's sort of the good news of Riqui Puig. Basically, Will Kuntz said he is exactly on target for his return because basically it's 12 months is a very reasonable time frame in there. Greg Vanney said that you have to manage Riqui a little bit because Riqui was like, let me play in the Minnesota game, the last game of the season. Like Riqui was like, put me in, I'm ready to go, that type of thing. So I think that's sort of where they're at. So they're slowly bringing him out. Here's the sort of the rub on Riqui right now though, and I will give you my take on it because I've certainly seen the reaction to fans and everything that goes on. Riqui Puig was supposed to be available for our exit interviews. In fact, it was listed that Riqui Puig would be there and other players.
So that we could ask him all these questions about how you doing, Riqui? How's it feel?
Because we have not talked to him since after probably the MLS Cup celebrations. I mean, first of all, like in terms of actual media availability, it probably hasn't happened since I don't know. It was probably sometime in the playoffs. We usually didn't get him
he was,
all that much.
He was
for,
in the locker room during the champagne celebration, and he talked a little bit. I remember.
I think that was probably it. Yeah.
It really wasn't much of an in-depth interview. It was like, "Hey, you're full of champagne."
Yeah, and he was being pushed around in a barrel full of alcohol, if I remember correctly. So yeah, all the good stuff. That was the last time I think we had any sort of real interaction with Riqui Puig. Last minute, Riqui Puig decided that he didn't want to talk to the press. The behind the scenes talk of some of that is that Riqui didn't want to talk about his injury and said, hey, I don't want to talk about my injury and I'm not going to talk to anybody. It was somewhat telling that, and I don't know if this is a coincidence, but he then posted later that day on Instagram that he was playing golf somewhere, and that could have been from a different trip and different thing. I'm willing to be wrong. It just, in me, it rubs me a little bit wrong that as part of your job is to come. Marco Royce went and talked to everybody. The only guys who didn't talk to us, by the way, were the guys that the Galaxy basically said thank you to, which was Diego Fagundez, Eric Zavaleta, and Miguel Berry. Those guys were not available to speak to. I think everybody else basically spoke to us, and that includes the guys who rarely speak. Miki Amane did it in English. Julian Aude did it. We were trying to get Aude to talk in English a little bit, but Aude did it in Spanish. Sanabria did it in Spanish. Guys we don't normally get to. Gabriel Peck was there, and he had a translator, so we got to talk to him because we normally don't get to talk to him that much. So everybody else on that team basically was available and talked to us except for Riqui Puig. Kevin, I told you whenever we started, I said I don't know that fans care anymore that they don't talk to us. Riqui goes on his social media and he can do his little things and that type of thing. Maybe it's selfish of me to expect that Riqui Puig would want to come and tell us about his recovery and everything that's been going on and what he's looking forward to the next year. And had Riqui come out and said, I don't want to talk about my injury, right? And I just want to talk about what's going forward. We could have been like, how are you feeling now? And what do you see for next year? How do you hope to be ready for next year? Like there's a whole bunch of things we could have talked about, right?
And he's an adult. If he said, I don't want to talk about the injury, then I think the Galaxy need to say, then don't talk about the injury. And that's a great story. If I'm doing that story, hey, Riqui, how's the injury? I don't want to talk about the injury. I want to talk about next season. That's my story. My lead is Riqui Puig is not thinking about the past. He's thinking about the future. And it's a great positive story. But by him not showing up, and then posting the golf pictures of when we wonder what's going on with Riqui Puig. Is the injury worse than we thought? Is he not a team player? Is he not part of this organization? Does he not want to help the Galaxy going forward? All these questions come up. Why? Because we have no answers. And I know what you're talking about with the fans. I went through that this year with the Dodgers. The Dodgers clubhouse is the worst in baseball by far, and I know this from talking to other reporters from other teams. The amount of guys that are in there that are willing to talk, that are willing to answer the questions is next to zero. And that's why if you read many Dodger stories, you find a lot of quotes from Justin Robleski and Jack Dreyer and Dalton Rushing, and very few from Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman, and none from Shohei Ohtani. Because, and I remember when my son was younger, he was a big Albert Pujols fan, and I covered baseball then, and I said, Pujols, he's with the media as a guy, he's a jerk. And my son said, I don't care if he's a jerk with the media. I just care that he's a great baseball player. And I get that. But here's the part where I think the media, sometimes some media people, I don't know that you and I do this. I think we try to avoid it. But some media people can be a little self-important and say, you need to talk to me. That's why you exist. But there is this question of accountability. And if, and we saw that in the playoffs. Shohei Ohtani hits 3 home runs, strikes out 10 players in a game. In the playoffs, it's never been done before. He goes right to the media room and does the interview. The next night, he goes 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts, doesn't talk, avoids the media, is let out of the locker room by a security guard so he didn't have to talk. It's accountability. When you're doing things well, great, come talk to us and tell us all about it. When you're doing things wrong, I think you need to stand up and say, here's what happened. I'll try to, like Yomani, like Maya Yoshida did. I'm going to get the blood test. I'm going to figure out what went wrong. It's the accountability, I think. And I think Riqui needs to be accountable. And I'll put part of the onus on the Galaxy. They need to make these guys do that. And I was talking to somebody who used to be a PR guy with the Dodgers, and he talked about signing a player to a big contract. And they came in, they sat down with him, the PR staff did, general manager, the manager, everyone came in and said, congratulations, welcome to the team. Here's how we're going to use you this year. Here's how we're going to win. And then the PR guy said, with this big salary comes some responsibility. You need to be accountable. You need to talk to the media. And he said, that would be great. And then he went out and, of course, didn't do it.
Right.
But that's the thing. It's not like, hey, you need to talk to me because I'm with the LA Times and I'm a big, important guy. That's not it at all. I'm the conduit to the fans. And he has his social media and he has his golf outings and all that stuff on there. That's great. But someone needs to hold his feet to the fire and ask him the real questions, so that fans can be sure that he's applying himself and that he's ready for the team, and that he's a team player. You can't get that from the club website, and you can't get that from his social media feed. And so it's not that I'm the most important person that Riqui needs to talk to me. It's that I'm the conduit to the fans that hopefully will ask the questions the fans want to know and present the perspective that the fans need to hear about for their favorite team.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because I've seen it shift so much even in the time that I've covered Major League Soccer. And I know you've been around sports for a long time, but I'm seeing the shift to where players are just like, no, we're not going to do it. And bottom line is, league isn't making them. I mean, certainly in Major League Soccer, and you can talk all the way up to Major League Baseball, right? But Major League Soccer isn't making these guys talk, isn't doing the whole thing. It used to be David Beckham talked after every game, Kevin. Every game, David Beckham talked.
And every Thursday, Robbie Keane, Landon Donovan, and David Beckham. Now, the MLS rules say they have to talk every day. Yep. I think that was a bit unreasonable with that caliber of players.
Right.
But the Galaxy, every Thursday, those guys talked, and they knew it, and they were good, and they gave us as much time as we needed.
It's one of my criticisms of Messi, right? Which is David Beckham was the spokesperson for the league whenever he came over, and he was asked all the questions, he answered all the questions, he did it. I mean, quite honestly, Zlatan more times than not spoke to us, and whenever he didn't, it was okay because he usually spoke to us almost after every game, right? It was like every once in a while he'd be like, "No, I'm not going to talk," and we're like, "Cool." Like that's and we understand that too, right? Like you can request somebody, and if you get somebody all the time, when they say no, it's fine. Right? There's plenty of guys who have said no recently this year that we get on a regular basis. So you're like, cool, no problem. You don't want to talk today? That's cool. We'll catch you another time because we know it's going to be. There are more than a handful of guys on this team who are just like, I don't talk to the media. Gabriel Peck won't talk to the media mostly because, they need to get a translator in there. That's something that the LA Galaxy needs to do a better job of because quite honestly, he's a designated player and he should have been answering a lot of questions this year. Joseph Paintsel speaks to the media on the stuff. There's some guys who speak Spanish, who sort of use that to make sure that they don't speak to the media. So there's some things there that I would like to change. If it's in a perfect world, that I would like to change because I think you're right, Kevin. I think we can be used to be a conduit. But I'll say it. Riqui doesn't like people talking about him. Really, he doesn't. Right, and that's his personality.
He doesn't like to be challenged. If we say, Riqui, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to soccer, he's in for that interview. If you say, hey, Riqui, you guys got shut out again. What's going on? Then
right.
That's an interview he doesn't want to have any part of.
It's just interesting, and like I said, I think it's more than just Riqui. I think it's a thing over the entire league that's sort of descending on, and we're seeing more and more of that. And we've sort of seen media availability sort of hinder a little bit as well. But we still get to talk to most of the guys. We're lucky on the podcast that we get guys to come on the podcast. I'm still pretty happy with everything that we're able to do. But I just thought that was interesting on the Riqui side of things. So we'll see how that goes. Adam,
well, and you're right. You're right about just one last point. You're right about when you sign a designated player contract, and the Dodger PR guy I cited is right. There's responsibility that comes with that. Now, Eric Zavaleta, is a great guy, and we've talked to him before, but we're not going to put the screws to Eric Zavaleta. Hey, you didn't get off the bench, and you only make $200,000. Come talk to us. But Riqui Puig, who played every minute of every game all season, and you're the highest paid player on the team, you need to talk to us. No, I'm not going to. What?
Yeah, I know. Adam, $5 super chat. We talked about Diego Fagundez, so we appreciate that. And then Adam had another one about Diego Fagundez. Will he take a pay cut, especially with the kind of cars he drives? If not, he would have to sign somewhere else. I mean, I think that as of right now, and as I feel right now, and I reserve the right to change this as it sort of goes into circles and everything else that sort of happens, because things that I think and believe are true right now, Kevin, evolve, and as you get closer to January, when things change, priorities change, things move around. So it really does sort of think that it really does change in, whenever it goes month to month, day to day, that type of thing. And we're going to have a long off season, so a lot of things could change. But as of right now, I really would suggest that Diego Fagundez is not coming back to the LA Galaxy.
And let me say right now, you and I personally, both of us will miss him dearly.
Great guy.
Great guy. But the Galaxy will miss him a lot too, and I think Will Kuntz knows that, and so he's going to have to sort of play both ends against the middle. But if Diego Fagundez goes, we will miss him, and the Galaxy will miss him.
100%. I think that in the whole narrative of leadership, Diego Fagundez is a super important guy. And by the way, there's a reason he's been around the league so long. There's a reason that, everybody speaks so highly of him. He's a prince among men. Is that one of those sayings that people say? He's absolutely.
I wasn't going to go that far. Yeah, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, absolutely a wonderful teammate.
And a guy who gets the what we've just been talking about, the
100%.
accountability.
100%, always, ever. And by the way, a guy who will absolutely tell you whenever you get it wrong, and happy to be there for it.
Yep. I wish more players would do that. I hate it when people tell me 6 months later, by the way, no, tell me now so I correct it.
Yeah.
I'm not above being corrected.
Or we can sit there and we can have a nice discussion about it. And we can just decide that we're just not on the same side of things. It's like, okay, that's
remember
cool.
Remember when he called me out for not showing up?
Yeah, I know. And rightfully so. It was good.
Absolutely. And I took that to heart, even though he was kidding, as it turned out.
No, it is. He's absolutely he's a real good guy. So hopefully he's back. I'm with you, Kevin. I think that for the Galaxy to be successful, having somebody like that would be really important. I'm just telling you, I think that there's very little chance of that happening. So,
and we're not saying that just because we know he listens.
Actually,
we are saying that entirely because we know he listens.
No. I get chastised and corrected by many players on this team. It's fine. And that's, again, I think that's the accountability part, though, right? You and I talk about this all the time. There may not be a whole bunch of us, but I was taught by you. I was taught by Scott French. I was taught by Damian Calhoun. I was taught by these guys who you say something and then you make sure you're available so they can find you and be upset at you if they want to do that. And then you can talk about it and get the whole thing done. Because it doesn't do anybody good to just be like, nope, I'm out. So yeah, that's it. So that's sort of where we sit with the LA Galaxy, right? We talked about all the different roster things. Here's what I got. So the Galaxy declined options, right, was Barry, Zavaleta, and Fagundez. So that is in total, with all those salaries added up, about $1.739 million, right? $1.74 million, somewhere in there. That doesn't mean you're getting all that back because Barry, Zavaleta, I think was a supplemental roster guy. So you're, in terms of cash outlay, that's the cash. That doesn't necessarily mean salary cap or targeted allocation money coming back or anything like that. The Galaxy exercised options on about $750,000 worth of players. So you had John Nelson, you had Mauricio Cuevas, you had Tucker Lepley, you had Parente, and you had Vivi. Again, that not all of that hits the salary cap. That's just in terms of that where it goes. They had sort of the new contract side of things. We don't know how much those new contracts, and these are all last year's numbers, right? The fall release of the numbers, but the new contracts, about $675,000 in terms of new contracts between Ramirez and Brady Scott. So those are sort of your numbers now that you're playing around with. I was reading some of the league-wide stuff, and they're not expecting the LA Galaxy to have a ton of room in general allocation money and a ton of salary cap room and anything. But I think that there are players on the roster that are currently on the roster that won't be on the roster whenever this team starts its CONCACAF Champions Cup.
And the salary cap does rise a little bit, not much, but enough to help squeeze something in there.
Maybe it does, but I still think you're going to move. And so now you have to decide, if you're Will Kuntz, whether or not you have what options you're going to take in terms of moving players and doing stuff. Do you move the young players and take a hit on the upsides? You can look at Johnny Perez as a player that the LA Galaxy moved and sort of hit on the upside in terms of money coming back from Nashville and everything that goes on that. So that's sort of the question. And I think rightfully so, Kevin, you and I started our call today with sort of who's going to be on the hot seat more whenever a thing comes through here, because you have Greg Vanney, who just received a 3-year contract extension, a very rich contract, as you pointed out. But you also have Will Kuntz, who really hasn't got to pick a coach yet. He inherited Greg Vanney, and usually general managers get a coach. So if things don't go well, and this is speculation on my part, speculation only, if you can't get Greg Vanney and Will Kuntz on the same page, who survives that kerfuffle? If indeed that happens, right?
And this will be a very important season to determine all that, because Will Kuntz was the wonderkind who came in and turned things around, dismal franchise, and got them to an MLS Cup. Got a ton of credit for that. Probably, well, I don't know, I would say more than he deserved, but he got a lot of credit, and Greg Vanney didn't get some of that credit. And Greg Vanney was the one that made it work. Greg Vanney is the coach that won. So they do need to be on the same page. But what I was going to say is, I think this season there's the start of the season, especially the first 5 before the World Cup break, there's a ton of pressure on both those guys. And if the Galaxy starts off really slowly again, I think only one of them survive. As you had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of club-friendly options in that outs in the Greg Vanney contract that it's not like they're stuck with him for 3 years or they need to pay him a ton of money. There's a way they could get out. And so if they get off to a poor start, that's why I think when you look at, do we move some of the young guys that have an upside 3 or 4 years from now, or do we move some of the old guys who could contribute now? I think they may lean in favor of the old guys because they need a fast start. They don't have to win an MLS Cup. They got to make the playoffs. They got to win a road game this year. They have to put the stench of this season behind them, and they need to do that very fast. If they start off, again and go winless in their first 16, I guarantee
nobody's surviving that, right? Like
nobody survives that.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. No, I mean, that's one thing I said I could guarantee for 2026 is the LA Galaxy would have a better start than they did in 2025, right? It's like one of those things, like you win one game in 16 and you're automatically better,
Their first road win would outpace what they did this season.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Galaxy actually start on the road this year too, right? Because they've had some home games at home recently, and as the first game, and so you're sort of like, oh, well, then maybe this is a chance for the Galaxy to start things on the road, which can always be an interesting sort of tale to start on the road. So again, I think there's going to be a lot of questions for the LA Galaxy. I think there's going to be even more movement than we've seen, and I think a lot of people, I think rightfully so, are a little skittish because you brought a lot of players back, Kevin. There's a lot of players who were on this team who was, as you correctly pointed out, the worst team in Major League Soccer, the worst team in LA Galaxy history. They weren't technically the worst team in Major League Soccer this year. They finished 4 spots from the bottom, but the worst LA Galaxy team ever. Right.
Yeah, and they said the worst team ever. Let's do that again. Here's everybody's back.
And everybody's back. So I think that saying that you're just simply going to have everybody back, even if I agree that the LA Galaxy got better in the second half of the season, that, had they played sort of in the second half like they did in the first half, they probably would have been a playoff team rather easily. But that being said, is you can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And I think you really have to go in there, and that's why, again, I don't think this roster is even close to set. I expect that there are going to be moves.
I get that. If they played the way they played the second half of the season, they would have gotten 48 points and made the playoffs. I get that. I understand that, rationally and intellectually. But the same token, if you win your last game, are you going to say, if we'd played that way all season, we would have went 34-0?
Well, I mean, yeah, but when you say it over 17 games or plus, right? Because it was more than 17 games because they include
18.
Leagues Cup and some of those as well, right? But like you can go into that. That's different than whenever you're sitting there saying, well, you won the last 2 games. Good job. Like that type of Yeah, I get it.
Well, we got good when no one cared, when it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat, right? But there were certainly some teams down there, like Dallas really wanted to beat them whenever they came in at the end of the year, and it was sort of like, okay. And by the way, I look at the Western Conference, and I've been watching some of these playoffs, and I will say the Western Conference feels weak right now, and I will say that the LA Galaxy probably, had they made the playoffs, would have been a team that could have won a couple games, maybe won a series in the MLS playoffs, just because it's been ugly. There hasn't been a ton of great soccer in there, and I don't know who's going to stop really LAFC right now when you're looking at.
I think the game in Vancouver.
That's the one.
Maybe the MLS Cup, because it's going to be Mueller against Son on the turf in Vancouver. I think the turf hurts LAFC just because they're not used to it, and then the winner of that game would, I think, go probably play Seattle most likely. But I think that's the game. Whoever wins that game, I think gets out of the Western Conference. I think those are the 2 best teams right now.
I agree 100%. So you look at that and sort of look at it. But I'm just going to say the Western Conference isn't that strong. So, I mean, you certainly have to put that in. The LA Galaxy played a bunch of Western Conference opponents as they closed down the season. And you could say the Western Conference was weak, and the Galaxy were part of that weakness this year. But had they at the end, if they snuck into the playoffs somewhere, they probably could have won some games. They were not horrible, and certainly looking at the teams that they played at the end, Minnesota, Dallas, those are teams that are in the playoffs, right, and playing. So just little things. I can understand the progress, but I do question how stable, quote unquote stable in quotation marks, this roster stayed. Right, like there wasn't a ton of movement there. I can understand bringing back Nelson. I understand bringing back Cuevas. I understand Lepley again. Lepley, Parente, and Vivi, not high spending dollars there. You're not changing a whole bunch of things, but guys who can contribute on the field and have contributed on the field for the LA Galaxy. The Ramirez thing certainly questions me, and now I look at the contracts that you're going to have to move that don't make sense to the LA Galaxy. I think Sanabria is a big one that's going to be a question mark for the LA Galaxy and how crowded that midfield is. Zonka's that one at center back. I think Ramirez is the one up top. How can you change the spine of things? How can you make the LA Galaxy spine better? Because you're looking through that center backs, midfielders, strikers. Edwin Cerrillo. You're looking at Amiro Garces. You're looking at Chris Rindolph. You're looking at Maya Yoshida. You're looking at the goalkeeper, JT Marcinkowski or Novak Mitrovic, right? Those are questions that have to be answered, but at least you have two guys there who I think each of them can probably get the job done, and Mitrovic is going to have to take a step forward this next year if he wants to continue to be that number one. But then back up to that striker. Striker to me is the biggest one. Striker to me is absolutely the biggest position, and I don't know that the LA Galaxy always agree with that.
Yeah, that's clearly the focus right now. I think we should say something too. Eric Zavaleta did not play a ton of minutes. I don't think anybody would look at him and say there's a guy who was an MLS All-Star in waiting. But he's a squad player, but he was an important squad player. He's an important guy in the dressing room. He took a lot of heat because he's related to Greg Vanney and didn't play, and so he stayed on the team. But that's not why he was on the team. He wasn't on the team because he related to Greg Vanney. I think he was an important guy, and they're not going to miss any of the minutes that he played or didn't play, but I think they are going to miss him being around the team.
Greg said as much. So, yeah, 100%. So, all right, that's where it sits right now. LA Galaxy into off-season mode. The roster decisions are there. The questions will only continue to mount as we continue on. And, of course, the Galaxy getting ready for that November 15th game against Club America. So that
big clash. What are they calling it? The Angelino Cup or...
I know. I hope not. I don't think they're just calling it the LA Galaxy versus Club America because that's sort of where it is.
A game that big needs to have a title.
I don't think they do. So that's what we got. All right. Anything else that you would like to talk about? I'd like to
go back to bed if it's okay with you.
I'm sure you would. You had a long time. So congratulations on surviving a World Series there. You did it again. Championships all around. Whether it's MLS or whether it's Major League Baseball, you seem they're attracted to you right now. So that's why the LA Galaxy didn't win this year. You weren't at enough games.
Well, see, it's all these beats I different cover. The Galaxy probably called my editor and said, "Get this guy out of here." And then the Kings did that, and I did a little NASCAR, and they said, "We can't deal with this guy." And the Dodgers said, "We'll take him." Although I was doing the fifth story at we had Jack Harris, our great beat writer, does the game story. Dylan Hernandez and Bill Plasky, they're the columnists. Bill Shakin sort of did the thumb-sucking piece. I was the fifth guy. So every game, it's like 9 guys in the starting lineup, and they say. Half of that team is off the limit. You get the 5th guy. You get the guy who went 0 for 3 but made a good play in the outfield. You get to do him. So anyway, no one was reading what I was writing, but everybody go look at my social media, kbaxter11 on Twitter. I took a picture I'm really proud of, and it's going viral. It's a picture from after the 7th game of the World Series. I'll say no more, but even you liked it.
I liked it. I said it was a great picture. You were saying, "Oh, one of my pictures is blowing up. It's got over 1 million views." I'm like, "Oh, the one with the bat." And you're like, "Yep, 100%." So good. Well, we're glad to have you back, and of course, there'll be lots of Galaxy talk here as we go forward. No show on Thursday. Probably back next Monday. God only knows what we'll talk about, but we'll try to find something as we go. It'll probably be everybody being angry at all the stuff we just said, and we'll just be responding to all that. So
except Diego. Diego will like us.
No, I don't know, man. I think you're getting a phone call tomorrow. That's what I think. So good for you. All right. Let's see. Anything else? You good?
Diego, call me.
Yeah, 100%. All right, if you're looking for Mr. Kevin, the Panda Baxter on social, it's at kbaxter11, all those places, latimes.com for all of his baseball writing, and anything else that you can find him on, it's LA Times and Mr. Kevin Baxter. If you're looking for me on any of the social at Galaxy Podcast, head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com, and then, of course, any of the places you can find our podcast, whether that is Apple Podcasts, whether that is Spotify, SoundCloud, any place you get your podcasts, you can find Corner of the Galaxy. Glad to be back. Nice little stretch there of having some time off. No show on Thursday, but we'll be back on Monday unless something major happens. All right. For Mr. Kevin, the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman, and you've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast, and be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo. And on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.